Danze, everyone. I'm the captain, Ross Memphis Pamber. With me on the squeaky wheel is my friend, the co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary, Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta homeland. We'd like to acknowledge these lands are also the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, Piikani, Treaty 7, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the ongoing, continued friendship and relationship. We'd also like to say thank you to our First Nation friends, the Métis settlements, and to the Métis brothers and sisters, with whom we give our thanks to our elders for their guidance, and to Mother Earth, she shares her bounty. Thank you, folks. Let's get the wheel squeaking. And another fine one for us today, Lawrence. You know, the weather has been absolutely fabulous. You know, the fall's been kicking in. The wheels are squeaking, as I like to call it, as we move towards the hunkering down in our province. But there's always another conversation. It always seems like the government is doing something that we get a chance to talk about. Our own citizens are doing something. And all across this beautiful province, we're all still trying to figure out, how do we get back together? How do we connect? How do we enjoy our time? Lawrence, thank you again for our week on the squeaky wheel.
Yeah, no problem. I'm pretty excited. Oh, I got a little kid down here. Just hold on a second.
Folks, whenever the conversation gets started between Lawrence and I, just to bring you back into all of how our conversation works, this is us from a Métis perspective. Now, we don't necessarily profess to be experts on everything. When it comes to the satellite world that I work in, I tend to try and think that I'm a bit of an expert. Lawrence has his political background and his community relation background. So his knowledge and his ability to connect our community has been fabulous. And our chance here on the Squeaky Wheel, where you can find us at thesqueakywheel.ca, is to try and hopefully continue to ignite people's desire to have conversation. And folks, we're all allowed to have a slightly different opinion, but at the end of the day, if we can't have conversation, how do we move forward? So, Lawrence, I know you're a busy family, you're a busy household. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to bang on today, on which door we're going to bang on. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the M&A. We're going to talk a little bit about I'd like to talk about land acknowledgments, hit on some of the usuals that we talk about when it comes to sports, a little bit of music. I know we're both trying to figure out what's happening in Manitoba and such. Where do you want to start, Lawrence?
I think maybe we can start with the land acknowledgement. I mean, we just mentioned the one that you did with the overlay track on some of the B-roll that we have, but no, it's a very interesting topic that you bring up, and territorial acknowledgements and land acknowledgements are sort of what they're called, but they're part of that truth and reconciliation calls to action. That's part of it. And if governments or industry or schools or whoever institutions want to start doing them, then it's probably the best to sort of lend an ear to the nations that are already there that can help you and assist you on writing those. But taking it on your own and doing the research on your own may not be the best option, because there's current terms that we use, there's current language that we use, there's current viewpoints that we use that you won't get that from Googling or in a textbook or an encyclopedia. It's real time, and you really have to reach out to the nations.
Well, and so Montreal Canadiens are now doing a land acknowledgement before each game. And I think we start to see a lot of that happening when it comes to more of the sports, in our province and such, and across our beautiful nation. But my concern sometimes is that the land acknowledgement just becomes noise. And I 100% agree with you. And we've had this conversation before. Don't talk about us without us. Don't start mentioning names and First Nation names and bands if you don't know how to pronunciate or enunciate them properly, or if you've connected with them. But if you've connected with them and allowed them to be a part of the conversation, saying, how can we be better represented when it comes to an acknowledgement? I think that's where we have a priority.
Yeah, for sure. And, we realize the efforts that are out there, but certainly when, some elders are sitting there and they're hearing it and it's, not what they think of, well, then, yeah, they'll voice their opinion or concern. And I'm the same way, right? Usually it's just a 20 to 30-minute conversation with myself, and they'll let me know what their Métis sort of sentences are, and I'll say if that looks okay, if it doesn't, so, but they definitely reaching out to the nations if you want to do it is probably your best bet.
And I do know, you're well connected. And I know when we were developing our land acknowledgement that we needed to recognize the nations who we have a connection with. And it was fabulous because with all humility that I usually provide on our show, I mean, Lawrence, I had to work on the pronunciation of the names. I needed to have a better understanding of all of the relations when it came to the Blackfoot and how that was connecting. And, the more books I read, folks, you're going to be able to find and look back at episodes and you will be able to find errors that we've made. And those errors don't come because, we're trying to put them in there. It happens and we're learning. And I think that's the best part of it. But Lawrence, we've talked about it all the time, a little bit of the direction when it comes to the squeaky wheel. And I know you like bringing up that topic because there is a bit of separation. Maybe let's knock on that door a little bit about how the squeaky wheel represents our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's something that I've been thinking about over this last week. And I've made the decision to kind of pull myself away from, away from the Métis Nation of Alberta, but we're still getting support from them, number one, which is a good thing. And because we want to not just focus just on Region 3 activities and events and stuff happening in southern Alberta, we kind of want to, bring that viewpoint across the homeland a little bit and talk about what the other provinces are doing, what the other leadership are embarking on, what sort of projects are out there, and really bring up the positive aspect of Métis Nation in this province. We hear so much negative stuff on social media, and it's usually from a few people that do it. They are the true squeaky wheels in that sense, but we certainly want to bring some positivity and light to who we are as Métis people, because there's thousands and thousands and thousands upon us, and thousands of Métis people that can contribute to Canada in its rightful sense, and Indigenous communities, but we never really highlight them as much as we should be, and I think that's what we kind of want to bring to Squeaky Wheel, and bringing it away from the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 was probably the best thing I could do, because we want to be a little more full circle on how we deal with Métis stuff here and the conversation.
Yeah, I think this is a safe space, same as it is a safe space for people to send us questions. And again, folks, we don't expect everybody to agree with everything we say. We don't expect you to agree with everything that happens at the level of the MNA. And I know we're going to talk a little bit too, Lawrence, about Manitoba, but if you aren't willing to, send your questions, then essentially that's like not voting. You're not becoming a part of the conversation. And I like to think this is a bit of a safe space, because as soon as you have that connection where, you have a certain representation, and in the end, it just becomes advertising. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to say, hey, we're here to have open dialogue.
Yeah. And I don't want like my role in all of this squeaky wheel stuff to look like I'm campaigning and I'm the president and I'm the best and I don't think that way. I'm a little more humble than that. And that's the way I was raised. But certainly I don't want to see, I'd like Métis people to be a little more visible. I like us to be in a little more conversations. I like us to be, out doing TV shows on TELUS or on APTN or doing those things. And us as Squeaky Wheel hosts to actually encourage that. And I think that's the most important thing. It's not about me. It's not about you. This is about the Métis Nation, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I come from it with a bit of the business background, or in my case, sometimes the musical background, but I get to share in the fact that you have those relationships and you've developed and cultivated those relationships. So I give you a pat on the back, because it's a huge effort that's taken on your behalf. And people do want to hear from somebody who's got that experience. Otherwise, they just be listening to two doofuses rather than these two doofuses.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't spend 8 years in the Métis Nation for nothing, right? At the end of the day, I still want to be able to contribute, if I do leave this term, or if I don't decide to run again or whatever, and I do decide to run for another 4 years, that's besides the point. But 8 years this is a pretty different viewpoint that you're going to get.
Yeah, that's a lot of time. And again, I'm still trying to figure it all out half the time. I read this fabulous article, and it was in the Daily Mail. And now I imagine there's also more information that's available even more locally, but it was neat that this had reached the UK. And it was about, and this is what makes it fun, and this is the reason we try to connect people, is on Vancouver Island, they figure it's about 1,300 years ago, there were, and you could still see them when the tide goes out, about 150,000 sticks, sort of indifferent along the coastline. And they sort of identified as being part of the Amux people. And the most recent work that's been done seems to indicate that this was an elaborate fishing trap, that as the fish would come in, as the tide would come in, they would get into the woven sort of nets, so they could swim in. As soon as the tide went out, they'd run into where these nets were, and then the families could go out. And I think predominantly for a lot of the cases, it was the matriarchs and that would go out there and capture all this fish and, start the salting and such like that. But fabulous that, for in our little nation here, and they estimate it was probably 300 different traps that were a large part of this network. And again, 1,300 years old that's been used. And yet it's only just now we're really starting to get an idea of it. And folks, look it up. Take your time, look this information up, because it's a fun read, and it's very interesting how we're always learning. Just like every Métis cart trail that you seem to go down, or that more work is being done, they tend to find larger, more predominant information about how the Métis culture was in southern Alberta.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fish farms are a big aspect in environmental area down in BC, and certainly we understand that why they have issues with a lot of those fish farms, because they do infect all the other ones and make more species at risk. The issue is, hopefully that's a protected area when they come across those things, and they don't disturb that area, because that's a deep, rich history for those Aboriginal people over there on the west.
Yeah,
right?
And it's interesting how you would think, and this is one of the challenges of trying to say, manage information from generation to generation. Traditionally, we have the elders who share that information, but if you don't write it down, if you don't have a place to put it, and somebody forgets, it becomes like that telephone game where you sit in a group of kids and you tell the first one something and see what the information is when it comes all the way around. This is information, sadly, that's been lost. So hopefully our archaeologists, thank you to them, and for their patience and time, that hopefully we've answered something, and this information's making it as far as the other side of the world.
Absolutely. And we have a very good one, Keisha Superno, in our community, and she's leading most of the charge for these burial grounds, and we wish it, we're going to have her on as a guest. I had a chat with her last week, and she was more than willing to come out, so can't wait for that. And we can talk about that experience for her, but should be interesting.
Well, let's get everybody healthy behind the scenes so that you and I can get back together, because I do like sitting in our little podcast studio now. To go to the opposite side of where we are in the world right now, it was only a few days ago, due to my relationship with working with satellites in space, I watched Captain Kirk. I watched the whole thing from when he arrived at Blue Origin with Jeff Bezos, and the rest of the team was put in the capsule. And essentially, here we fire off a rocket that's gone up at least already 15 times before. And this was sort of the second group. And William Shatner, Captain Kirk, was a part of that 4-person mission. And he gets to have the accolade of being a astronaut after that. Up above the Kármán line, which is 100 meters or 100 kilometers above the Earth. And then the rocket makes its way back down and lands as it has been taught to land, safely on its landing pad. and then you slowly watch the capsule as it makes its way. So they have about 3 minutes of weightlessness, and then slowly back to Earth where the parachutes deploy and safely touch down on the ground. And surprisingly, that looks like it's only maybe a few kilometers from where the rocket landed safely. They use a lot of machine learning and computer managed learning in order to land that rocket. But I was quite surprised. I struggle with the economics of the space tourism, but also I'm excited by the fact that, this type of computer learning has we don't have to destroy the rockets every time. They don't just go crashing into the Earth failing. So here's what we're starting to see. And Captain Kirk came out and he said he never wants to forget that feeling. It was incredible. And now I'm even more curious.
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting how they move through it and how far they go. I'm sure it's might be bleeding some of their wallets a little bit, but maybe not some of these old guys. But yeah, I mean, if it has a direct purpose for a lot of us, then yeah, we'll see the benefits of it. But if it's just a bunch of rich guys going out there and going up to the sky for a couple minutes and coming back, and it's not really contributing anything. But governments sometimes, if they're going to attach themselves and say, yeah, let's do a space program, well, then that sometimes is beneficial to us, right? But
and you're absolutely right. But by the same token, we all complain and go, oh, well, they're just a bunch of old guys going up space. Sure. But sometimes just going to watch millionaires play hockey is just a bunch of guys watching them skate around. Economics, people's interests, the desire to grow. Hey, folks, if you're angry about it, send us an email. tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca. If you think it's a funny story, or if you have funny stories that you want us to talk about, fire them over to us. tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca. Love to read that kind of stuff. I love it when people bring this kind in, because this is the fun part of our conversation. Going back to the whole idea of the hockey, now the first game just started with the Flames versus the Oilers.
Right. The first Battle of Alberta.
That first Battle of Alberta. Did you watch the game?
Yeah, I did actually watch it. Watched it after the Habs game, but I sat and watched a bit of, at least the last period, and McDavid is looking good, and yeah, but the stands are quite full, which is very interesting to me. So, we'll see how that goes at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you look at it, I mean, when you watch the baseball games, and this has now been for months, and you look down there and see that the stands were full. And, it wasn't like that for us up here until finally the end of the baseball season allowed a fair bit of the fans to return back to Toronto Stadium. Now you're starting to see it here, and everybody has to be double vaxxed. Not even going to get into that conversation. So happy about that. It puts the onus on these community groups in order to make sure that people are doing their part. But it's a big change. It's been a long time, but it is fun to see the rivalry again, to see the energy and to have this sport back.
Yeah, I mean, I hope Tkachuk and Cassian relive their whole thing, but they didn't do too much last night. But Tkachuk is always the one that kind of instigates it, and he was fairly quiet. But the other
drives
players,
me nuts when he chews on that mouth guard.
Yeah, that's right. So, but I mean, yeah, it was a very high pressure, very fast game, which is good. Yeah.
Yep, fun energy. Other sort of tough news. There's a Haiti missionaries. I think there were 17 abducted, and they were essentially down there. I think they were building a school, from what I understand. My fear is, when Canada had the Meng Hui issue on behalf of the Americans, and then the two Michaels were captured in China, and all of a sudden people are starting, and it's not unusual historically to see these kind of kidnappings because it becomes ransom. But Canada, some people would suggest that that we, politically, did we cave? And what's going to be the expectation now? How do we manage when these kind of situations occur?
Well, I mean, Canada has an international mandate, just like its national mandate, and it has a budget for both international and national. If certainly this is not a comment on Trudeau on what he operates his international mandate, but certainly he brings a lot to G4 and all those other areas and contributes a lot of money to other countries. But people don't really talk about Haiti too much because of the instability that's there, and in order to make something stable, you really need to have a presence there in order to do that. And the Americans, if they don't focus on that, they're focusing on somewhere else. And same with Canada, then, that whole region is going to be unstable, at the end of the day. Well,
let's throw some positive thoughts out for those people because, they're down there. And again, I'm not 100% familiar with every aspect of their decision as to why they were in these locations or how that worked out. But the, challenging situation. But I guess, again, this faction, whoever has done this, there will be conversation and or maybe potentially consequences. We were talking a little earlier, Lawrence, about before we jumped on the show, there was a new sculpture being put up in Rocky View. So this close to home, folks. This is in the area right around Airdrie, Calgary, and it's though we again often because these are the communities that we live in, it's close to home, but these same situations happen all over Canada and down in the US. What was you had a comment you wanted to make?
Well, I think for me, like when you mention Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 in your sculpture or your in your acknowledgement, like I said, if it gets to the area where we're not a part of those sort of events or we're not part of the unveilings or then it becomes, well, what our name, are we being tokenized? And that's always the big conversation amongst not only Métis Nation but First Nation groups, right? So it just they I kind of had to let them know that if the right steps probably for reconciliation would have been to reach out and have us be there, especially when it's my kids are in Rocky View schools and I live in Airdrie and I'm only 5 minutes away from that sculpture, right? So people I could have been there and certainly gave my support, but we do appreciate the acknowledgement. It's just it would have been nice for us to be a part of that, and we could have had veterans there or whatever they wanted. So
you're absolutely right. You're right, and again, we almost go in a bit of a full circle. That becomes the acknowledgement. Sometimes is nice, but as you write, tokenism. That's not necessarily. There's better ways. Don't do things without us, without consulting, without having the connection, without having an understanding of what that area means to our nation or what it means, what our relationship with that community means. Yeah, I don't think there's much more message we could send across than, folks, just look it up. Look us up on, or reach out to us here on the Squeaky Wheel, and we'll ensure we direct you to Métis3.org. They're going to find you there. They pretty much only have to type your name, Lawrence, or Métis 3, Region 3. You're going to pop up. The Facebook will pop up. The website will pop up. Everybody knows you, right? Everybody follows you. All the politicians, all the community groups follow you because of, the role you play within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to establish a good relationship with Rocky View schools, right? At the same time, it might have been a half-hour meeting and show up, but certainly get to know the superintendent a little bit more and teachers and parents and all that stuff, and just be a little more visible in their community. And we can help them. It's what there's a question that comes up or during a class, there's a discussion about the Métis Nation. Well, then all a teacher has really to do is reach out to us and we're there, very easily. So that, and that's what sort of happens. But I find if you leave us out from the get-go, none of those other things fall into place, right? And so I'm sure that's with everybody else, all the other nations too.
Absolutely. If you're going to mention their names, folks, have a little conversation with them. And Manitoba, where do we figure this is going to play out? Because again, as we're trying to build the federal relationships of all of the different Métis communities and the Métis settlements and the Métis families, where's Manitoba falling up?
Well, they did make the decision to leave the Métis National Council out of, their reasons. And certainly President Caron has extended the invitation for them to at least come back and reconsider it. Which, that has to be acknowledged too. We didn't expect a new president to come in to say, well, you're gone, and that's it. See you later type thing. Yeah. But she's willing to keep the door open for them. But really, I think we need to have that conversation at a Métis national level about, M&O and their role and what that means to us as MNC. And if, we certainly come to an agreement that they should really consider being there or continue being suspended from MNC, well then that's sort of where we have to go. But I don't think we really want to do that without Manitoba's participation in that, because they are part of the homeland, they are part of the Métis Nation, and I don't want to sit there and think that we shouldn't have this open dialogue with everybody across the homeland. And I think Manitoba Métis Federation are planning this whole Red River Métis thing. And, I'm Red River Métis. My ancestors are from there, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be asking Manitoba or MMF for any services, especially for my family, because I might have to relinquish my M&A card. And why would I do that? I'm in Alberta, Yeah. So there's that whole conversation needs to be delved out, and I'm sure they're considering that too. And then Canada's viewpoint, they have self-governing framework agreements with pretty much all the provinces but BC. And, what does that mean, Manitoba? They still have to keep their self-government agreement with them. And if they become a self-government, then what? Right? They're going to be on their own, or they're going to be for the whole homeland. We're just not sure. There's so many unsure situations, right?
Mm-hmm. I think we just have to continue to get that message across as to, what was the history of the Métis? How are we continuing to capture that information and validate our stories so that we know we're sharing the correct message, and try and, move together as a nation, as a citizenship. That story's not going to end by the time we chat next week. I know that, but as long as we continue to acknowledge saying, folks, yeah, there's gaps in our relationships where it's that the Métis Nation is trying to figure out.
Yeah, now, I represent M&A and I have friends over at MMF. I don't want to sit here and go, well, I can't talk to you and I can't be your friend anymore.
Right.
Because you're Métis, I'm Métis, and it's just confusing me, and we have this big wall up. But, certainly it's just not who we are as a community. We're a Métis Nation and we should all move together. Even when we have disagreements, we should deal with those in a format like a meeting, not on social media, not anywhere else, but in a meeting with all the delegates there.
And don't just take your ball and go home.
Yeah,
you got to stay and be a part of the conversation and say what's going to be the greater good. Hopefully this is part of us sharing that information, Lawrence, gets people to the table. And let's close on something that I think is just kind of fun. Well, not fun for necessarily Vince Neil, lead singer of Motley Crue, because he just fell off a stage in Tennessee. And we're going to have to find out just how badly he hurt himself. They're going to have to pin him to the stage, I think, or tie some straps around him. Because, it's not the first time. But the Beatles and Stones. So Paul McCartney, who's said that it was John Lennon who essentially broke up the band, had pointed out that, the Rolling Stones were really nothing more than just a blues cover band. And maybe in the most polite way recently, a few days later, I'm sure Mick Jagger was well informed of this Paul McCartney statement, but he had said, I'm sure it's just a matter of time before Paul McCartney joins him and the rest of the band playing a blues cover. So maybe those superheroes, those superstars in the music industry, if we can get them to work together, the rest of us can work together.
Well, that's unfortunate because there's a lot of people who like the blues and he's trashing the blues, right?
I don't know if he's trashing. He's just saying this is where they came from. They weren't really he might suggest that they weren't building all crazy new material like the Beatles were.
Right.
They were paying homage to
Right.
a long history of music, and then this was new to them in on the other side of the pond, and there they were trying to, share that sound.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
but I'm never going to be too harsh. Being a musician myself, for 40 years I've tried to figure out which one's better. Not about, to me, which one's better. It's how do I appreciate both of them.
well, I mean, Clapton's British, and he plays the blues,
Yeah.
and he does it quite well. So do the Stones. They play that bluesy style music quite well too. So.
Oh yeah, if you're gonna throw sticks and stones, you're gonna hit somebody, and you're gonna hit a glass somewhere in your house. Lawrence, I think I've taken up just about enough of your time. Thank you again for our weekly chat to have a conversation. Thank you for bringing a good Métis perspective and for your experience and your knowledge. Folks, make sure you get out when there's opportunities, because this is October, to do your civic duty. Make sure you continue to share the conversation. When people ask you about truth and reconciliation, let them know you appreciate that they've acknowledged it, and we're all still trying to find some more of the answers. But the most important thing is that we're in the conversation. So from all of us here at the Squeaky Wheel, from myself, Ross Memphis Pambron, Lawrence the President Gervais, thank you, and keep the wheel squeaking.